A cowboy took a chance on a stranger, discover the amazing way he found hidden prosperity. Jake squatted on the parched dirt, sweat dripping from his brow as he tugged at the knotted wire of the rusty fence. Each motion felt heavy, laden with the weight of responsibility, his family's legacy against a crushing tide of debt. The sun beat down relentlessly, mirroring the stagnation that had sunk into Marlowe like a sad refrain. He thought of his father, how he'd spun tales of roping cattle in the twilight with such fiery passion. But those days felt like whispers lost in the wind now, buried under loan documents and dwindling cattle prices. The memory of footsteps echoing through the dusty halls of their ranch felt far-fetched, almost laughable. The laughter felt like a shared dream slipping away. A faint rustling caught Jake's attention, pulling him from his internal turmoil. He squinted into the shimmering heat and saw her, Clara. A figure on horseback, her silhouette framed by the heat waves, wearing a weathered hat that obscured her features. The townsfolk had spoken in hushed tones about her, shunned for reasons he didn't quite understand. Gritty, defiant, she seemed to carry a storm with her, one that could either make him or break him. Intrigued yet hesitant, he watched her slide off her mare like it was an effortless act. Could something as simple as her arrival change everything for him? Or was it yet another mirage? She approached, her boots stirring up clouds of dust, and he couldn't shake the sense of camaraderie mixed with a profound uncertainty. "Need a hand?" Clara's voice was steady, confident. But why would she want to help a fugitive of this town's past? It echoed in his mind like a warning bell. What would the others say? Instantaneously, a moral dilemma punctured his thoughts. He felt the weight of expectations crushing down, demanding loyalty to a community that wouldn't easily welcome a stranger. Yet there was something alluring in Clara's ruggedness, a potential partnership he desperately needed to grasp. But the shadow of their different worlds hung over him. Jake's fingers trembled, the tension knotting tight in his chest. Could he put his ranch, his family's name, on the line for someone marked by whispers, by judgment? A bead of moisture slid down his temple. Was it sweat or fear? Would helping Clara mean defending her against the murmurings of a townsfolk resistant to change? Jake's mind raced, caught between trust and trepidation. Just as hope flickered to life, the possibility of saving his ranch, the wind carried whispered threats. What if the outsider with a vendetta returned, stirring the past to taint the future? Would Clara's secrets eclipse the breaths of life he hoped to revive within his family's legacy? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Clara's presence forced Jake to confront his fears and desires. Could he take a stand for both the land and this woman with the fiery spirit? His gut twisted with every fleeting glance as he felt again the tight cord of loyalty to a community that bred uncertainty. Would he lose what little ground he had in choosing the wrong side? A confrontation loomed, ready to ignite the deep-seated prejudices of Marlowe. Jake's heart raced, his breathing irregular as they stood on the precipice of change together. Yet the cruelty of what lay ahead pressed in from all sides. Should he shield Clara or return to the familiar cycle of silence and shame? As the shadows deepened, he faced a stark reality. Would he dare to break free, fighting for love and a future illuminated by hope? The moment of choice was approaching, but the outcome remained painfully uncertain. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with unspoken words and the uncertainty of consequences. Jake took a deep breath, the dusty scent of the earth filling his lungs as he tried to steady his nerves. Clara's confident gaze seemed to pierce through the layers of fear that had settled within him, and for a moment he saw the shape of a possible future, full of promise and hard work, yet shadowed by the weight of previous judgments. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice barely rising above a whisper. It was a question not just about her sudden appearance, but of the conviction behind it. Could she truly offer help, or would her presence unleash a storm of complications he wasn't prepared to face? Clara crossed her arms, her expression unwavering. "To help, Jake. You're not the only one carrying burdens. she replied, her voice infused with determination. You think I haven't faced my share of judgments? Those whispers don't just stop when you ride into a new place, they follow you. Her words struck a chord, awakening something deep within him, a flicker of empathy amidst his own turmoil. His past screamed at him with echoes of loyalty to a community that thrived on gossip. At the same time, Clara represented the kind of challenge that could either ruin him or save him. Jake's mind raced as he contemplated potential paths, weighing the safety of the familiar against the fierce tug of hope that accompanied Clara's offer. Would he have the courage to relinquish his tightly held views of loyalty? Would he trust that her expertise could breathe new life into the dying embers of his ranch? Clara stepped closer, sensing his hesitation. We can talk big about hope, she continued, her gaze steady. But it won't mean anything if we don't act on it. I can teach you something about resilience. It's a skill that doesn't come easy, but it's worth every battle. Resilience. The word danced in his mind, echoing his father's tales of perseverance through storms and droughts. It caught him off guard, igniting a flicker of interest and a burning curiosity about the possibilities of collaboration. Perhaps he needed to step outside the confines of what he'd always known, to embrace something unorthodox. I can help you mend that fence, Clara said, throwing a glimmer of hope into the air. And then we can talk about the cattle, about reviving your brand, about strategies to get out from under that debt. Together we can tackle it. The prospect of teaming up with someone who understood struggles ignited a flame within him, stirring an unfamiliar hope. Yet doubts clawed at him. What if supporting Clara meant diving headfirst into the chaos he was so desperate to avoid? Was he ready to confront the hostile scrutiny that might ensue? I can't simply abandon my family's name, he protested, though the conviction in his tone faltered under her unyielding gaze. Jake felt as if he were teetering on a tightrope, each step forward threatening to plunge him into uncertainty, but imagining the potential outcome invigorated him. Decisions loomed, each weighted by the precarious balance of trust. Would he dare align himself with Clara, risking the reliability of his world for the promise of a shared path? Tomorrow, Jake declared, newfound resolve surging through him. Let's start mending the fence, and who knows, we may learn something about each other along the way. As Clara nodded, a flicker of recognition passed between them, a shared understanding that this endeavor could become their lifeline. But with dawn came uncertainty, and the fears of Marlowe had not yet been confronted. However, Jake felt a determination burgeoning within him, willing to challenge the tide of judgment that had kept him subdued for far too long. The sun dipped below the horizon, signaling a transformation, but shadows lingered, reminding him that the harder battles lurked just beyond the next rise. His thoughts spiraled back to that outsider, those whispers that had never truly faded away. Could they face the ghosts of their past together? Or would the weight of judgment crush any flicker of hope they dared to grasp? Tomorrow would reveal the answers, but the stakes felt perilously high, and the risk was greater than ever. With the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, a gentle glow illuminated the stark reminders of Jake's decisions from the day before. The familiar lines of his ranch, once silhouettes against the dark, now seemed to awaken with possibilities. He stretched his muscles, still stiff from doubt, yet felt a palpable shift in his mindset. Clara would be here soon, and with her arrival came a sense of urgency mixed with an exhilarating tinge of hope. As Jake walked toward the fence, he felt an unaccustomed resolve rising within him. Thoughts of the cattle, the debts, and the stagnant legacy tangled with visions of the audacious future Clara had painted. She had spoken of resilience, and as he examined the weather-beaten posts that leaned precariously, he realized that existing in the shadows of tradition couldn't be the extent of his legacy. The first task lay before him. Not just fixing the fence, but dismantling the barriers within himself. He could no longer afford to cling to the past. Each post he replaced would echo his commitment to growth and adaptability. It was time to turn judgment into a catalyst for change. Clara arrived, her vibrant energy brightening the morning. "Ready to get started?" she asked, a smile dancing across her face as if she held the key to his untapped potential. Jake nodded, his voice steadier than he'd expected. "Yeah, let's do this. I think this fence is only the beginning for us." As they worked side by side, Jake began to appreciate Clara's approach. She demonstrated techniques for mending the fence that were both efficient and innovative, challenging some of the beliefs he had held onto for too long. He caught himself asking questions, eager to absorb her knowledge, fascinated by how her insights merged seamlessly with practical application. "Where did you learn all this?" he inquired, curiosity replacing some of his earlier trepidation. Clara glanced up, a spark of passion igniting her gaze. "Traveling, working with people who have different methods and perspectives. Sometimes you have to step away from your own footprints to discover a new path." Her words settled into Jake's mind like seeds taking root, urging him to question his own stagnant approaches. What if the traditions bestowed upon him were not the only path? What if Steve and the others who whispered behind his back were merely seeing the surface? Stepping back to admire their progress, he paused to reflect, allowing himself to visualize what a thriving ranch could look like. Revitalized, with more cattle than he had in years, and nets of opportunity woven through partnerships that extended beyond the confines of his upbringing. Yet, creeping in alongside the burgeoning hope was a nagging fear. What if taking this leap created a rift that was impossible to repair? The small-town loyalty drilled into him since childhood loomed like a shadow, questioning the integrity of his newfound aspirations. Clara's laughter pulled him from his reverie. "You know, it's not just about the fence or the cattle, Jake. This is about rewriting your story." Her confidence in him challenged something deep within. As the sun climbed higher, so did his ambition. Could he truly allow himself to embrace this varied approach, balancing tradition with innovation? The duality sparked a tension he hadn't anticipated, between the cautious rancher and the seeker of new ideas. With each nail he hammered in, he found a touch of liberation, a sense of agency that he hadn't felt before. Perhaps, just perhaps, the risk was worth the potential reward. He began to imagine shifts, not only in his work, but in his interactions with the community, visualizing breaking through the old barriers of judgment that often held sway over his ties. Time slipped by unnoticed, until a sudden cracking from the nearby woods jolted him. They both turned sharply, eyes scanning the tree line. Was that a figure lurking in the shadows, watching, judging? "Jake." Clara's voice drifted into a cautious whisper. Jake's heart raced at the thought of facing someone from Marlowe, someone who would question his intentions alongside Clara. Would the weight of his decisions resonate or ruin everything they had started? The moment hung in the air, anticipation swirling as their eyes clashed. He needed to confront not just the emerging future, but also the shadows of his past ready to challenge this fragile resurgence. "Let's not let it distract us," he said, attempting to crush the slivers of apprehension curling through him. "We can handle this." But could they truly face the judgment waiting in the wings, or would the sinuous threads of his heritage entrap him once more? The rustling leaves and the weight of uncertainty clung to the air like a thick fog as Jake's mind raced with options. With Clara beside him, he felt both the allure of progress and the weight of his former life pressing down. Every moment he lingered on the figure in the woods intensified the internal clash between fear and ambition. "Let's check it out," Clara urged, mirroring the anxiety that gnawed at him. But she did so with a vibrant curiosity that he couldn't help but admire. Jake hesitated, calculating the risks. "What if it's someone looking to undermine what we've started?" He cringed at the thought, recalling the murmurs from the townsfolk, the whispers of betrayal and judgment. Could he face them without dishonoring his family's legacy? "Or it could be someone interested in what we're doing," she countered, her tone encouraging. "Let's not let our fears dictate our progress." She shifted her stance, ready to take action, her spirit igniting something within him. With a decisive exhale, Jake nodded. "All right, let's see." They edged toward the tree line, propelled by a mix of apprehension and a budding curiosity. Each step forward felt simultaneously grounding and liberating, as if he were straddling a divide between the past and an uncertain future. Emerging from the trees, they found not a menacing figure, but a young woman with auburn hair, sun-kissed and rugged, her frazzled appearance revealing either hard labor or a recent struggle. Surprised by the relief washing over him, Jake's shoulders relaxed. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said, her voice steady despite the wildness of her surroundings. "I'm looking for help." There was an earnestness in her eyes that captivated him, lending her a sense of urgency. Before Jake could respond, Clara stepped forward, her demeanor shifting from caution to readiness. "What do you need help with?" "The ranch up the road is in bad shape and I—" Her voice faltered, vulnerability surfacing with every breath. "I can't do it alone anymore." Jake caught Clara's glance, sensing the unspoken connection forming between them and the newcomer. This moment could change everything, not just for Jake, but possibly for countless others who had mustered the audacity to ask for help. Jake wrestled with his instinct to retreat into the familiar. "Our resources are already stretched thin," he warned, uncertainty clouding his mind. But Clara's expression radiated conviction, whispering silently for him to reconsider. "What if we band together?" Clara proposed, her speculative tone inviting rather than demanding. "We could share our methods, learn from each other, and make sure it works for both sides." Jake's heart raced, pounding against the walls of tradition he had long clung to. The concept of collaboration was foreign yet intoxicating, someone reaching out for help, challenging his often solitary methods. Could he really forge a new path aligned with cooperation? He felt the tension of his upbringing swelling in tandem with a growing desire to embrace change. "We could explore this, but it will take commitment," he finally replied, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. Clara let out a small cheer, her excitement infectious, and Jake felt a flicker of something else, a stirring belief that perhaps the expansion of his world was possible. As they exchanged contact information, Jake couldn't ignore the gnawing recognition that change was creeping up on him uninvited. Could he truly step outside of his cultivated comfort zone? An ember of self-doubt flared within him. Tradition was a powerful anchor. What if this was one more misguided leap, one more step toward further isolation rather than understanding? After their brief meeting, Jake and Clara stood silent, taking in the weight of forthcoming decisions. Clara turned to him, her eyes deep with understanding. "There's always a risk in moving forward, Jake, but it may be the only way to yield the growth we need." Jake's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sun began to dip, signaling the close of the day but not the end of their journey. There was no escaping the crossroads beckoning for his attention. "You're right," he conceded cautiously as the magnitude of the moment sank in. Could he bridge the gap between tradition and knowledge, family and potential? And more importantly, what awaited him should he decide to embrace this unknown path? A chill tingled down his spine as he felt the weight of choices yet to be made. Unbeknownst to him, the seeds of opportunity had taken root. In that moment, Jake stood before the first real challenge of his personal evolution, an uncertain wave cresting toward him. "Tomorrow we will face who we are and who we want to be," he murmured, the words binding him to his resolve. What Jake didn't realize was that those who looked back at him were not mere spectators of his aspirations, they embodied the potential for transformation. And as the evening shadows loomed, so too did a new confrontation approach, one that would test not just his resolve, but also the very fabric of his understanding of community and identity. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, igniting the sky with hues of orange and gold. Jake's thoughts churned as he sat at the kitchen table, absently tapping his fingers against the worn wood. The invitation from Clara and the stranger loomed large in his mind, like a promise cloaked in doubt. Were they prepared for the labor of trust and cooperation? He could almost hear the looming echoes of tradition reminding him that working together would open doors, but might also lead to unfathomable complications. Clara arrived shortly after breakfast, her usual exuberance radiating confidence. "Ready to change the world?" she joked, but Jake couldn't muster a smile. "Change," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He felt the weight of stagnation in the air. The day ahead, filled with unsure collaboration, felt like an uphill battle, like mounting a horse that hadn't been ridden in years. "I know it's a lot to take in, but think about what we discussed. This could be the turning point," Clara pressed, her eyes sparkling with a mix of determination and kindness. "What if it isn't?" he asked, a defensive edge sneaking into his voice. "What if it brings more trouble than we're ready for?" "Every opportunity comes with risk," she shot back, her tone sharper now. "We can't let fear keep us shackled to old ways." Her words sparked something in him. Defiance flickered at the edges of his uncertainty. Jake took a deep breath, aware that the tension in his chest could either drive him backward or propel him forward. The past had been comfortable, but had it truly served him? "All right," he replied, tone steadier. "Let's do this." The decision tasted sweeter, but laced with the bitterness of doubt. They ventured to the ranch, the aging boards creaking beneath their feet as they approached the struggling homestead. The ramshackle house loomed before them like an old memory stilled in time. The young woman, whom Jake learned was named Sophie, emerged from the shadowy interior, her auburn hair glowing in the morning sun. "Welcome," she said, her genuine warmth instantly dispersing some of his apprehension. "I'm glad you came." As they discussed the dilapidated state of her ranch, Jake felt the stirrings of resolve begin to crystallize within him. The rooms echoed Sophie's struggles, yet pulsated with potential. Clara traipsed alongside them, enthusiasm contagious as they outlined tasks, noting areas that cried out for care. While they mapped out a strategy, Jake discovered something unexpected. He was good at this. He shared insights about livestock and crop rotation, practical knowledge he'd acquired through years of solitude. He felt the rhythm of conversation blend harmoniously with the underlying tension, and for the first time, he recognized the value of dialogue, a dialect of its own. But the deeper they plunged into planning, the heavier the self-doubt crept back, coiling around his resolve like a snake. His voice quivered. "What if we can't deliver? What if this isn't enough?" Jake's expression darkened, plagued by the shadows of his fears. Sophie's focus remained steady. "Restoration isn't instantaneous. It requires effort, perseverance, and faith in one another." Her strength resonated with him, challenging him to reinforce his own wavering belief. As the day unfolded, the trio began molding ideas into action, transforming plans into tangible tasks. With each nail hammered, each field cleared, Jake felt himself shedding layers of insecurity, slowly revealing a confidence he hadn't known was buried inside. But the thrill was mixed with anxiety, aware that risk was a double-edged sword. As dusk claimed the sky, a sense of camaraderie began to weave between them. Jake glanced around, noticing how their laughter echoed against the weathered boards, hinting at a shared future filled with possibility. He left the ranch feeling different, awakened to the thrill of hope mingled with uncertainty, the two binding him to the present moment. The apprehension still lingered, hovering like a spectre, but now there was a hint of possibility sprouting in its shadow. Then the eerie sound of rustling leaves pulled him from his reverie, cutting through his growing momentum. Something, or someone, was hiding among the trees. Could this newfound alliance withstand an unexpected threat? Jake's heart quickened, sensing that the past might yet claw back at him in unexpected ways. Would he stand firm, or allow fear to sweep him back into the shadows of obscurity? The shadows deepened around the ranch as Jake squinted into the thickening dusk, listening for the source of the rustling among the trees. Each sound was amplified in the growing stillness, manifesting as a cacophony that rattled his nerves. He found himself frozen, a paradox of determination and dread battling in his mind. The challenges ahead with Clara and Sophie felt monumental, and now this thrill of vulnerability exposed him even further. "Jake?" Clara's voice cut through his panic, laced with concern. He turned to face her, gauging the worry etched on her features. Here they stood at the brink of something substantial. He could either recommit to their project or retreat into self-imposed isolation. The oppressive grip of doubt constricted his chest. His mind replayed the harsh lessons of disappointment from his past. "Did you hear that?" he asked, attempting to latch onto the moment's crisp reality. "I did," she replied, eyes scanning the edge of the woods. "Maybe it's just an animal." The words escaped his lips but felt insipid. What if it wasn't? What if it was a reminder of his inability to control the chaos of life, a mere foreshadowing of his inadequacies? As Clara moved cautiously toward the sound, Jake felt the urgency to follow, compelled not just by the risk, but by the growing responsibility he felt toward the two women, or perhaps just toward himself. A flash of resolve surged within him. He would not allow his past failures to fog his future. He couldn't afford to let fear dictate his movements any longer. "Let's check it out, together," he said finally, his voice steadier than he felt. With an encouraging nod from Clara, they stepped toward the trees, approaching the source of agitation carefully. Every cracking branch and crunching leaf beneath their feet heightened the tension, and Jake found himself mentally preparing for whatever might lie ahead. Then he saw something, a flicker of movement, the way shadows can sometimes play tricks. Suddenly, a small white rabbit darted across the brambles and disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Uncontrollable laughter bubbled up inside him, a release of pent-up fear. Clara chuckled, her amusement a testament to their shared relief. But the moment soon slipped back into somber reality. Jitters of doubt crept back, now mingling with the warmth of camaraderie. "See? Just a bunny," Clara buoyed, but Jake recognized that the encounter had unearthed something deeper. Their fears, those manifest in the minutiae of life, were often greatly exaggerated, lingering specters from shadows of the past. As they returned to the fading light of the farmhouse, something had shifted within him. The earlier sense of being overwhelmed by the collaboration morphed into something tangible, a thread of connection that would bind their legacies to the undertaking, one repair at a time. In the days ahead, as they continued to labor on the ranch, confronting long overdue repairs one nail at a time, Jake poured himself into the work. They replanted fields, built fences, and tended to livestock. With each task completed, the burdens of his past began shedding off of him as if they were layers of worn clothing. But with newfound investment came further introspection, and Jake discovered hidden competencies, his knack for problem-solving, his burgeoning leadership qualities, and a latent resilience he had not entirely acknowledged. With Clara and Sophie depending on him, he began to see their project as a reflection of himself, a living testament to the transformation they were all undertaking. Yet as he found himself thriving, whispers of the past still scratched at his consciousness. What if he faltered again? What if he let them down when they needed him most? Just as familiarity hugged him like a warm embrace, he caught sight of something on the horizon, dark clouds gathering, an ominous threat looming over their progress. As he shielded his eyes to peer deeper into the sky's approaching fury, an unsettling premonition twisted in his gut. Would he embrace the storm, or would past failures cloud his newfound clarity as the first drops of rain began to fall? The moment of truth was approaching, and Jake knew he would have to confront his fears in ways he had never anticipated. The rain came down in sheets, soaking the earth and turning the recently tilled soil into a muddy quagmire. Jake stood at the barn's entrance, watching the tempest pull at the edges of their hard work. It was as if the weather was a physical manifestation of his swirling doubts, a heavy reminder of every misstep he had ever taken. He could feel Clara's presence nearby. She was organizing tools inside, her focus unwavering despite the storm. "Jake," she called, breaking his concentration, "we need to move the livestock into the barn. They'll get spooked in this weather." He nodded, shifting his weight on his feet, the internal conflict gnawing at him. The winds howled, whispering his insecurities with each gust. He moved into the barn, embracing the familiar sense of hay and leather, but his heart thudded with uncertainty. Moving the animals felt daunting, a test of his resolve and leadership. As he began ushering the cows, he stumbled across a stubborn heifer that refused to budge. Panic flared in him. What if he was unable to control her? The all-too-familiar feeling of paralysis threatened to surface. He drew in a slow breath, trying to harness the steady resolve he had been building. "Come on, girl. It's just for a little while," he pleaded. His voice held more conviction than he felt. He recalled Clara's unwavering determination. Leaning into that memory, he offered a gentle nudge, this time coupling it with a firm command. "Let's go." To his relief, the heifer followed suit, her resistance weakening with each step. A surge of adrenaline pumped through him, blending with realization. He was capable of leading, not just in the subtle confines of the ranch, but in confronting his own fears. Continuing down the line, he quickly moved the rest of the livestock into shelter, their comfort fueling his determination. As the last cow crossed the threshold, Jake stepped back, watching as they huddled together, safe from the chaos outside. "I didn't think you had it in you." Clara's voice drew him back to reality. He turned, surprised by her praise. "Guess you were wrong," he quipped, but he felt the flush of warmth at her compliment. "Maybe we can tackle more than we thought," she stated, her gaze steady. Her words were simple, yet they inspired an unexpected lightness in him. It was affirmation, a lighthouse in the storm that reframed his growing confidence. Yet, as night swept in and the skies continued to rumble, Jake found his thoughts heavy once more. He had faced one fear, but what about the deeper, festering issues hovering in the shadows of his mind? Clarity suddenly felt elusive. He could feel a weight, a burden, lingering just beyond the surface. In the stillness of the barn, under the soft sounds of animals settling, Jake confronted himself. What if he truly failed this time? What if Clara and Sophie depended on him for success, and he crumbled? The voices of doubt were like the storm, whispering incessantly. The resilience he had unearthed felt fragile, and he wasn't certain he'd be able to maintain it against the onslaught of second-guessing. Each success, for every problem he solved, revealed another layer, exposing vulnerabilities he could no longer ignore. It dawned on him that his past was not just filled with failures. It was a sequence of learning moments designed for growth. Perhaps, instead of seeing them as shackles, he could leverage those experiences as stepping stones into a future he fully controlled. His moment of clarity flickered, and with that came an understanding. He had to allow himself to be vulnerable, to truly embrace both the possibility of success and the risk of failure without retreating into his shells. Breathing deeply, he harnessed this newfound acceptance, reminding himself that confronting each challenge armed with past failures meant he could adapt, grow, and ultimately thrive. The storm above raged on, but deep within him, a sense of understanding took root. Just as the rain fed the earth, allowing new flora to blossom, perhaps the turmoil also served a purpose. With this thought lingering, Jake knew the next day would require him to face not only the aftermath of the tempest but the deeper storms brewing within his psyche. Would he be bold enough to confront those inner conflicts, or would he let self-doubt once again steer him away from the future he was beginning to forge? As dawn cracked the horizon, soft light filtered through the remnants of yesterday's storm. Jake stepped outside, his boots squelching in the residual mud, the earthy scent of rain mingling with the freshly turned soil. The barn loomed behind him, a sanctuary that had shielded not only livestock but also his burgeoning resolve. Today felt different. The cleansing rain had washed away more than just dirt. It brought clarity, a fresh start. With a determined stride, he set about assessing the ranch's needs. The cattle were settled, but he knew there was still much to accomplish. Clara's words echoed in his mind. Maybe we can tackle more than we thought. He glanced over at the barn, considering their ongoing projects, specifically the dilapidated fence that had been leaning perilously close to collapse. Time to get to work, he muttered to himself, a hint of excitement bubbling beneath his cautious exterior. It wasn't just the fence that needed fixing. He needed to reinforce his own framework, his self-belief. Acquiring tools from the barn, he approached the fence line. Each swing of the hammer felt like an assertion, a declaration of intent against his ever-present doubts. He remembered the heifer, and how he had faced her stubbornness with newfound fierceness. Maybe this was the test he needed, a chance to cement his progress by transforming a daunting task into a manageable challenge. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the terrain, Jake found a rhythm. He became absorbed in his work, the physical activity channeling his anxiety into a steady focus. Piece by piece, he repaired the fence, and every nail he drove in felt like a nail into the coffin of his self-doubt. Around midday, Clara ventured out to check on his progress, leaning against a post, arms crossed. "You're really going for it," she noted, her eyebrows raised in surprise. He paused, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Figured it was about time. The fence won't fix itself." "Neither will you," she remarked with a teasing smile that softened her words. "You can't just fix what's outside. Sometimes you need to confront what's within." Her observation struck a nerve. Somewhere in the depths of his progress, he had inadvertently skirted the very issues he needed to face. The fence was a start, but it wasn't the end. "You're right," he said slowly, the admission surfacing like a long-buried truth. She tilted her head, regarding him intently. "What's still eating at you?" Jake hesitated, the openness he had experienced yesterday feeling tender and vulnerable. "I've been thinking about my past failures, how they might define me," he admitted, ashamed yet aware. "Your past is just that, past. It doesn't define your future unless you let it, she replied, her conviction palpable. Have you thought about what really worries you? Letting go? The weight of her question lingered, compelling him to dig deeper. The fear of repeated failure loomed larger than life in his mind. What if today's accomplishments crumbled under the strain of tomorrow's uncertainties? But here's where the revelation sparked. Self-doubt had been his prison. Identifying it was the first strike against those bars. Maybe it's time I confront that fear, he mused, more out loud than to Clara. Maybe it's the only way you'll know just how much you can achieve, she replied. Her statement ignited a determination in him. He had allowed the past to entangle him like a pesky weed choking a blossoming flower. What if he were to face that fear head-on, to actually pursue opportunities with this renewed sense of agency, instead of retreating into old habits? I'll do it, Jake declared, fueled by Clara's encouragement and the genuine will to move beyond himself. I'm going to apply to that agricultural program I hesitated about before. Clara's eyes widened. That's a big step. I know, he nodded, the magnitude of his decision resonating. But if I'm going to grow, I can't keep holding back. As he finished the last repair in the fence, an electrifying realization emerged within him, taking risks, confronting deep-rooted fears, and stepping beyond the barriers of self-doubt were his keys to growth. And so the day wore on, turbulent thoughts still swirling in the back of his mind. He was on the brink of confronting not only his fears, but also the exciting possibilities of his untapped potential. The thought exhilarated him, yet a shadow lingered, a whisper of uncertainty. Would he have the courage to follow through once the pressure set in? Or would he falter before embracing his newfound ambition? The questions loomed as he prepared for the deliberate leap ahead. The time had come to face not only what troubled him, but to unlock possibilities awaiting just beyond the horizon. The day's warmth turned the mud beneath Jake's feet from a chill reminder of yesterday's storm to a stubbornly clingy embrace. Each swing of the hammer reverberated with potential that felt as ripe as the shining summer sun overhead. He stepped back to admire the fence, a symbol of his newfound determination, framed against the azure sky. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, the victory over the fence felt more profound than a mere physical repair. It was a declaration of his resolve to fix not only the ranch, but also himself. Yet with every clink of metal against metal, doubts threatened to invade the growing confidence he had begun to cultivate. He recalled Clara's words about confronting not just tangible barriers, but those lurking deep within. Taking that first step toward the agricultural program represented a monumental decision, one that required more than just courage. It demanded introspection and a recalibration of his self-identity. As he settled down to lunch, the golden rays shifted, casting long shadows that mirrored the creeping uncertainty still clinging to him. He half-heartedly pushed his food around on his plate, feeling the weight of impending choices clouding over the tangible satisfaction of the repaired fence. Could applying for the program be the catalyst for change he was hoping for? Or would it merely expose him to failure once more? Don't overthink it, he whispered to himself, but internally the storm raged on. Jake resolved to confront this internal battle head-on. He would revisit the motivations behind his fear, why the thought of applying sent icy tendrils creeping into his spine. Finishing his meal, he stood up with renewed purpose, his legs carrying him across the ranch more swiftly than before. As he rounded the barn, he spotted Clara tending to a nearby flower bed, the earth beneath her fingernails a reminder of the cultivation she was doing, not just of plants, but within herself and in life around her. "Hey, mind if we chat?" Jake called, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. Clara straightened up, brushing her hands against her jeans. "Of course, I could use a break," she replied, her eyes glinting with curiosity. As they settled on a couple of crates, the air buzzing with the thrumming of life around them, Jake began to express his concerns. He shared how the shadows of past failures loomed large, twisting his perception of himself into something he didn't recognize. Every unfulfilled ambition felt like an anchor pulling him back into the depths of his insecurities. "But what if you flipped that around?" Clara suggested, her tone inviting yet challenging. "What are some successes, no matter how small, that you've had recently? The fence, for one?" Jake considered her words carefully. A small smile crept onto his face. I repaired that fence without second-guessing myself, and in doing so, I faced my doubts head-on. Exactly. That's an achievement worth celebrating. What if applying for the program is your next step? The thought swirled in his mind. Could he view each decision not through the lens of fear, but as an opportunity to discover untapped abilities? What if failure was just an outcome, not an identity? Maybe it is time, he concluded, searching Clara's eyes for validation. Her nod was immediate and enthusiastic. You've got more grit than you give yourself credit for. Write down why you want this. Get those thoughts out of your head and onto paper. When you see it, it becomes real and manageable. That suggestion landed, the clarity of it striking a chord. He'd turned the chaos of his mind into structured hope, something tangible he could grasp. Embracing a new framework could pave the way for personal growth, one that wasn't dictated by the past. Reinvigorated, Jake stood taller, determination coursing through him. He would shape his fears through structure, a list outlining aspirations, breaking them into achievable milestones. The act of writing felt surprisingly liberating, transforming abstract fears into legitimate goals. But remember, Clara added as if sensing his shifting focus, it's not just about writing things down, you have to act on them. A thrill surged through him. The action was the catalyst for change. That was the moment he realized no amount of preparation would prevail without execution. But with each passing second, a weight lifted. Every intention, every decision now resided firmly within his control. What if I took the first step today? Jake urged himself, conviction firming up inside him. Then do it, Clara encouraged, her smile illuminating his path to decision. As he turned to walk back inside the barn to fetch some paper, a new sense of urgency enveloped him. The echo of his choice resonated loudly, propelling him towards immediate action. But looming questions still hashed at the back of his mind. Would the act of facing his fears actually translate to success? Or would the ghosts of the past rise up to haunt him once more? The tightening in his chest reminded him of the vulnerability that accompanied every leap into the unknown. Once inside the barn, the blank paper laying before him appeared less a canvas of possibility and more a battleground for his fears. Would he allow it to be the birthplace of his future or the place where dreams faded? With tension palpable in the air, Jake's pen hovered above the page, and the moment of truth approached. Every stroke would lead to revelation, revealing whether he would forge ahead into the light or retreat into shadows. The sun rose steadily, illuminating Jake's unyielding determination as he sat at the barn table, a blank piece of paper pressing down on his moment of truth. With Clara's encouragement echoing in his mind, he took a deep breath, steadied by an unfamiliar sense of clarity. Transitioning from the confines of doubt to the freedom of potential required action, a leap into the unknown. He wrote the first line carefully. I want to become a skilled rancher by attending the agricultural program. The words flowed like water breaking through an arid dam, each quickly following the next. The weight he had carried felt lighter as he continued, and the initial tremors of fear transformed into powerful strokes of conviction. With every point drafted, the realization struck him. He was mapping the future he wanted. The might of his written intentions began to blossom into concrete ambitions. Collaborate with Clara and Sophie on the relaunch of the ranch became the next thought, showcasing his commitment to the partnership that had evolved over the past few weeks. As he scratched the pen against paper, doubts began to dissipate. Take leadership roles, he wrote, consciously dismissing the old narratives of inadequacy that had kept him muted for so long. Each intention dismantled the weight of expectation and steered him toward a horizon filled with unvarnished accomplishment. Hours passed, and the pages filled with aspirations, actions, and strategies he had avoided facing all this time. Each line was a testament to overcoming trepidation, a signal to himself that he was not defined by the judgments of his past nor the limitations he had built around himself. As the ink dried, Jake realized this decision was about more than enrollment in a program. It was about personal reclamation, a promise to himself. With his list completed, he pegged it onto the barn wall, where it would brightly inspire him daily. He stepped back, a sense of pride swelling within. What once felt impossible now lay before him, tangible and achievable, bold choices etched in ink. Moments later, Clara appeared, her energy vibrant and inviting. Looks like you've been busy, she noted, eyeing the list. Jake turned with renewed vigor, the triumph of taking this first step fueling his resolve. I wrote down my goals, he shared, the excitement leaping from his voice. I'm going to apply for the agricultural program, and we can work on the ranch together. We won't just repair it, we'll revitalize it. Clara's expression radiated approval, her eyes alight with excitement. That's amazing, Jake. This could unlock so many doors for you, for us. Not long after, as they regrouped with Sophie, Jake recounted his list, the trio energetically discussing plans for revitalization and aligning their skills toward shared goals. Their collaboration thrived on mutual respect, transforming the earlier insecurities into constructive conversations about strategies that would embrace their combined talents. In that moment, Jake felt secure in his worth, recognized not just for his expertise, but for the value he brought as part of a team. Days turned into weeks, and with each meeting, the passion for their work ignited a community spark that had long been ill-fated. They worked tirelessly, building structures, cultivating fields, and nurturing not just their crops, but camaraderie, a binding thread woven through each interaction. As Jake embraced his role within this partnership, the small-town whispers gradually receded, replaced with a growing respect for their efforts. In the vibrant spirit of collaboration, Jake also overcame his reservations about vulnerability and approached an entirely new path, speaking openly with the townsfolk, sharing their vision to uplift the ranch he once feared would carry the weight of condemnation. The culmination of his efforts manifested when, at the annual community meeting, he stood up, nerves tingling at first. Many of you know me as the rancher in quiet retreat, he began, scanning the room of familiar yet previously intimidating faces. But today, I want to share what we're doing at the ranch. Together with Clara and Sophie, we're opening doors to new methods and collaborations. This can only benefit all of us. The warmth of their familiar land under his felt like solid ground, a stark contrast to the vulnerability of sharing his dreams. He engaged in discussions, dispelling misconceptions one thoughtful reply at a time, his insistence grounded in resounding confidence. When applause thundered through the room at the end of his speech, Jake recognized it as a victory, not just for himself but for his family's legacy. He graduated from the agricultural program months later, proud of what he had accomplished, evidence of relentless dedication and personal growth at his fingertips. On the day of his graduation, he stood tall, acknowledging not only his achievements, but the journey that had led him here. The internal battle of self-doubt had morphed into profound resilience and an indispensable sense of identity. Upon stepping outside, he breathed in the crisp air, a renewed sense of ownership enveloping him. Now, a leader recognized by his community, Jake embodied the culmination of growth that had once felt daunting. He saw his ranch not just as land, but as a symbol of rebirth, shaping itself into a beacon of opportunity for others, a legacy rekindled by daring to embrace vulnerability and pursue his ambitions wholeheartedly. His life transformed, reiterating the profound truth. Growth begins where fear ends. And to you, the reader, remember that every story of overcoming is precious, and yours could inspire someone else. So please, subscribe immediately to this channel to catch the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is invaluable. Comment below, sharing your reactions and thoughts. We want to know your theories about the journeys you've experienced. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who really need to see this impactful conclusion. Every story matters, and together we can support the personal overcoming journey.